It had been 5 celestial years since Madinga arrived at the rebel army base. 5 years of relentless training, of battles fought and wars survived. 5 years since the boy who once carried the divine pressure of the elder gods became the warrior they now feared. Before his arrival, the rebellion had been nothing. The elder gods barely acknowledged their existence. To them, the rebel forces were mosquitoes buzzing around divine giants, nothing more than a nuisance, unworthy of a second glance. The gods measured threats not by numbers, not by weapons, but by the weight of divine pressure, the energy that signified one's place in the celestial hierarchy. And by that metric, the rebels were insects. That changed the day Madinga left the Amadioha forest. The moment he stepped beyond the protection of the great guardian spirit, his power flared across the heavens like a beacon. The elder gods had felt it. His divine pressure was overwhelming, vast and untamed. For the first time in eons, the celestial realm shuddered under the awakening of something that should not have existed. At first, they did not know what to make of it. Had another elder god been born in secret? Had a long-lost entity awakened from some forgotten realm? They could not imagine that this power belonged to a mere boy. But as time passed and Madinga fought alongside the rebels, they understood. And with that understanding came fear. Now the rebel army was no longer ignored. They had gone from mosquitoes to a monster lurking in the shadows, a beast slowly growing, sharpening its fangs, waiting to strike. And the elder gods had no one to blame but themselves. Madinga had changed everything. Before his arrival, the strongest warrior in the rebellion was Midis, a former general trained directly by the elder gods themselves, a soldier who had betrayed his masters to fight for something greater. His skill in battle was unmatched until Madinga arrived. Then there was Zuberi, a warrior built like a mountain, whose raw strength was unparalleled. His fists could shatter stone. His body was a living fortress, a third-generation god, born to celestial parents who had been slaughtered by the elder gods when he was a child. Nyoka, the master of poison, a deadly assassin from a bloodline that had been erased from history. His venom had claimed the lives of countless celestial warriors, his clan, his people, stolen from him by the elder gods, their worshippers stripped away. Ekundayo, a warrior who lived for battle. His blade had carved through gods and mortals alike. He had no allegiance but to his own thirst for strength, and the rebellion gave him the perfect battlefield. Though a third-generation god, he idolized Shango, believing that one day he too would rise to such heights. Chakara, the wielder of the lightning spear, a warrior whose twin, Chaka, had been slain by the elder gods. Her soul burned for revenge, her spear an extension of her grief and fury. These 5 were known as the Iron Rebels, warriors who had defied the heavens and survived. Midis was their leader, the strongest of them all, and now Madinga stood among them. When he first arrived, he had been nothing but a boy, powerful but untested, raw but unfocused. He had no skill, no discipline, but he had the will. So they trained him. Each of the Iron Rebels took him under their wing. He learned strength from Zuberi, endured the brutal conditioning that transformed his body into something that could withstand the might of divine warriors. From Nyoka, he learned poison, deception, the art of the silent kill. He studied the movement of venoms, learned how to manipulate the energies of death. Ekundayo taught him swordsmanship, the relentless dance of war, the fury and joy of combat. Chakara honed his control over lightning, forging his raw celestial energy into something lethal, precise, unstoppable. And then there was Midis. Midis did not teach him technique. He did not train him in weapons or poisons or brute force. Midis taught him war, the art of battle, the strategy of gods, the psychology of warfare. how to turn an enemy's strength into weakness, how to break the will of a celestial soldier before the fight even began. For 5 years Madinga endured. For 5 years he fought. And now he stood among them, not as a student, not as an outsider, but as one of them. The Iron Rebels were no longer 5, they were now 6. Madinga had defeated 4 of the Iron Rebels in combat, proving himself against each one. Only one remained, Midis. He was no longer just a warrior of the rebellion, he was its strongest soldier. Stronger than Midis? That remained to be seen. But one thing was certain, the elder gods were no longer ignoring them. They could feel Madinga's divine pressure rising every day. And now, for the first time, they had acknowledged the rebellion as a true threat. That was why on this day there was celebration. The leaders of the rebellion gathered, seated around a large fire. Midis, Zuberi, Nyoka, Ekundayo, Chakara, and Iru, each of them speaking in high spirits. For 47 celestial years they had fought. 47 years of nothing. They had been a movement that the gods never took seriously. But now, the elder gods had officially declared them enemies, and for the first time, it felt like they had truly accomplished something. Madinga sat among them, listening, watching. "Do you understand what this means?" Nyoka grinned, pouring himself another drink. "We're finally worth something. We're finally more than an inconvenience to them." Ekundayo let out a sharp laugh. "I never thought I'd see the day. You know how much fun we're about to have." Chakara shook her head, but there was amusement in her eyes. "The fun ends when they come at us with full force. Are we ready for that?" "Of course we are," Zuberi grunted. "They have underestimated us for too long, and now, thanks to Madinga, they finally understand." Midis raised his drink, his voice steady but proud. "It took us 47 years to get here, and it took Madinga 5. That's what he's worth to us." The rebels cheered. Madinga smirked, shaking his head. "You're all celebrating being declared enemies of the gods? You do realize they're probably going to come at us with everything they have now." Iru chuckled. "Madinga, you should know by now, we thrive in the impossible." Midis set his drink down, his sharp gaze settling on Madinga. "But Iru's right. You've become too strong, too fast. They will hunt you now. We need to mask your divine pressure. If we don't, they'll track you wherever we go." Madinga considered that. He had never thought to hide his strength, only to increase it, but he nodded. "Then let's figure out how to do it." For now, there was laughter. For now, there was victory. But tomorrow, Madinga would face Midis himself, and the duel that would determine his place in history was about to begin. The air was thick with anticipation. The rebel army had gathered in full force, their voices blending into a single roar of excitement that echoed through the stronghold. Every warrior, every soldier, every outcast who had once been discarded by the elder gods now stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the moment that had been 5 years in the making. Madinga stood at the center of it all, stretching his muscles, rolling his shoulders as he prepared for what was to come. His spear rested beside him, its weight familiar in his grip, its blade sharpened to perfection. This was no ordinary duel. It was the final test, the last challenge that stood between him and full recognition as an Iron Rebel. The crowd pulsed with energy, voices calling out wagers, bets being placed on who would emerge victorious. Some swore by Midis, their leader, the undefeated warrior who had carved his name into history. Others placed their faith in Madinga, the rising storm, the prodigy who had turned the rebellion into a true force. Then, a sudden shift in the atmosphere. A wave of silence spread through the gathering, washing over them like a tide. It was Midis. He walked into the arena with the confidence of a man who had never tasted defeat, his double swords strapped to his back, their hilts glinting under the dim light of the torches that lined the battlefield. His presence alone was enough to command the attention of all who stood before him. He raised a single hand and the silence became absolute. For a long moment, he let it linger. He let them feel it, let them understand the weight of this moment. Then, his voice rang through the air, clear and strong. Do you understand what this means? He let the question hang, his gaze sweeping across the faces of those who had fought beside him for years. They all knew, but he wanted them to remember. This is not just a fight. This is not just another test. This is history. This is proof of everything we have built. A murmur rippled through the crowd, whispers of agreement, of acknowledgement. For 47 celestial years we have fought, Midis continued, his tone firm, unwavering. For 47 years we have been cast aside, ignored, treated as insects beneath the feet of gods. We have been hunted, we have been slaughtered, and yet we are still here. The murmurs grew into shouts, the fire in their spirits ignited. For 47 years we were nothing, and then 5 years ago everything changed. He turned his gaze to Madinga, and the crowd followed. We were lost, we were scattered, we had no future, and then this boy arrived. Midis paused, then he smirked. No, not a boy, a man. The rebels erupted into cheers, chanting Madinga's name, calling for him, honoring him as one of their own. Midis let them have their moment before raising his hand once more, bringing them back to silence. I remember when he first came to us, he said, his voice quieter now, more measured. I remember the way you all looked at him. He carried the same energy as our enemies. He walked like them, moved like them, and I remember how most of you hated him for it. The ones who had once doubted Madinga bowed their heads. I remember how you mocked him, how you challenged him, how you tried to break him, and yet he never raised a hand against you, though we all knew he could have. Even then, as a boy, he had the power to crush those who ridiculed him, but he didn't. Midis let the words settle, his piercing eyes cutting through the crowd like steel. Because Madinga is not a tyrant. He is not like them. And now, 5 years later, you call him brother, you call him family. A pause, and you should. Another cheer rang out, this time filled not with excitement but with reverence. This is not a duel, Midis continued. This is a ceremony. This is a recognition of what we already know. Madinga, the son of Wadinga, has already proven himself. He has bled for us, fought for us, killed for us. He has defeated more soldiers of the elder gods than many of you combined. He has earned his place. Madinga exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of Midis's words sink into his bones. This battle is not about proving whether he belongs, Midis finished. This is about giving him the honor of taking that final step himself. The rest of the Iron Rebels nodded, speaking amongst themselves, supporting the decision. Zuberi pounded his chest in approval. Nyoka smirked, and Ekundayo whistled, grinning as he called out, "Show him what you've got, Madinga." Madinga inhaled deeply, his heart steady. He had been waiting for this moment. Midis turned back to him, drawing both swords in a single fluid motion. His voice was quieter now, but it carried the weight of a challenge that could not be ignored. "Are you ready?" Madinga nodded. He reached for his spear, his fingers tightening around the grip, his body falling into a stance so natural, so effortless, it felt like breathing. The world around them faded. There was no crowd, no army, no rebellion, only battle. And then, as if guided by the will of the cosmos itself, the duel began. The halls of the divine council of the elder gods were vast, carved from celestial stone that pulsed with ancient energy. Massive pillars lined the chamber, each one inscribed with the histories of their reign, the battles they had fought, the civilizations they had shaped, and the gods they had destroyed. The elder gods sat upon thrones of divine essence, their towering figures exuding a presence so overwhelming that lesser deities could not stand in their midst for too long. 12 seats in a perfect circle, each one occupied by a being whose power shaped the very fate of Alkebulan. And at the center of it all, Mbutumba stood, livid. His voice boomed through the chamber, his rage filling every corner of the council as he paced, his fists clenched so tightly that sparks of storm energy crackled between his fingers. "This is beyond foolishness," he roared, his presence unstable, his divine pressure rolling off him in thick waves. "We sit here doing nothing, while an abomination walks free, growing stronger by the day." Some of the elder gods ignored him, as they often did, leaning back in their seats, watching with mild amusement as he ranted. Others listened, their expressions unreadable, waiting for their moment to speak. "Are you all blind?" Umbutumba continued, his voice filled with something between anger and desperation. "You underestimate him just as you have underestimated every other threat that has risen against us. But this one is different. If we do not act now, it will be too late." "You're overreacting," Jimani muttered, his deep, rumbling voice carrying the weight of a mountain. The elder god of rage and battle, his form massive and imposing, his skin dark as the void, his eyes burning with an eternal flame. His aura was wild, untamed, an embodiment of war itself. "A mere child of the 4th generation is nothing compared to us. You sound like a scared old man, Mbutumba." Mbutumba's face twisted with fury. "Are you suggesting that a mere child can kill us, the elder gods?" Jimani continued, mocking him. "Speak for yourself. If you are afraid, then by all means go fight him yourself." A ripple of chuckles and murmurs passed through the council. Mbutumba's hands shook, but not with fear, with humiliation. He had long been the weakest among them. Once he had been the 4th strongest elder god. But over the eons, as the divine rankings shifted, as worshippers flocked to new gods, his power had not grown. It had stagnated. While the others ascended, their divine pressure rising with each prayer given to them, Mbutumba had remained the same. The elder gods gained power through worship, through fear, through reverence. But when the mortals prayed for storms, they did not call his name. They called Amadioha. They called Shango, and though he never spoke it aloud, it haunted him. Mbutumba turned, his expression dark. "Laugh if you want, but I will not sit here and allow this child to reach his full potential. You all mock me now, but when the time comes, you will regret not listening to me." The laughter died. Silence settled over the room. And then Orunmila spoke. "You all love to underestimate things," he said, his voice quiet, yet commanding. Unlike the others, he did not exude overwhelming divine pressure, but his presence was unshakable, like a force beyond time itself. Some turned toward him, others scoffed. Orunmila sighed. "You all love to ignore threats until they are too great to ignore. When will you learn?" Jimani snorted. "And what, Orunmila? Are you suggesting that this boy, this child, will rise against us and bring ruin to the heavens? Please don't insult us." Orunmila's expression did not change. "Tell me," he said, leaning forward, his golden eyes cold. "Do you remember the unnamed ones?" The chamber fell into silence. The unnamed ones. The beings that the elder gods had once created, the offspring of their reckless experiments when they first sought to merge their essence with the first-generation gods. They had been intelligent, powerful, and filled with hatred for those who had made them. They had waged war against the elder gods, and they had nearly won. Had it not been for a desperate, brutal battle that lasted centuries, had it not been for the gods banding together to seal them away, none of the elder gods would be sitting in this room. The memories of that war, the one they tried to erase from history, still lingered in the minds of those old enough to remember. And Orunmila had just reminded them of their greatest mistake. "You all thought they were insignificant," Orunmila continued. "You dismissed them just as you are dismissing Madinga now." Shugara, the elder goddess of death and slaughter, let out a slow, dark chuckle. She ranked 5th among the 12 elder gods, her presence draining the very will to fight from those who stood in her path. Her skin was pitch black, her eyes empty voids, her form shifting as though wrapped in a veil of shadows. "You're suggesting that a single child is the same as the unnamed ones," she said, her voice smooth, deadly. "I'm suggesting that we are making the same mistake again," Orunmila replied. Shugara tilted her head. "Are you saying that we should bow our heads and negotiate peace with a mere fourth-generation god?" Orunmila did not answer immediately. Before he could, Ruhanga spoke. "I have a plan," he said. The others turned toward him. The elder god of war, technologies and weapons, Ruhanga ranked 7th among the elder gods. He was a being of pure creation and destruction, his mind capable of forging celestial weapons just by thought, a tactician, a genius of warfare, and a being who had long sought new ways to win battles before they even began. "If we do not want to engage Madinga directly," Ruhanga said, "then let's not." Shugara arched an eyebrow. "Explain." Ruhanga smiled, a sharp, calculated expression. "We reverse engineer the unnamed ones," he said simply. "We create a device to mask our divine pressure. We erase our presence. Then, when we release the unnamed ones from their prison, they will see only one entity with divine pressure strong enough to be an elder god." There was a moment of realization. Then, for the first time in centuries, Mbutumba smiled. Madinga would become their problem. The council agreed. Only Orunmila did not. And with that, the meeting was over. The war had just taken a darker turn, back to the present. In the darkest reaches of existence, beyond the veil of mortal understanding, in the ruins of the forgotten planet, the trickster sat in silence, his fingers lazily tracing the patterns carved into the obsidian table before him. His lair, hidden deep in the dead lands of a world long forsaken, pulsed with a quiet, ominous energy. He had been watching. He had always been watching. Everything was moving according to plan. Obanor stood in the distance, his chest rising and falling with controlled breath, his muscles glistening with sweat from another brutal training session. He had fought tirelessly against the Ngulumbo warriors, elite celestial warriors, beings trained to be relentless, ruthless, efficient. And now, they were no longer a challenge for him. That was both a victory and a problem. The power of Madinga's bloodline was awakening within Obanor, but not fast enough. The trickster knew that time was no longer on their side. He needed Obanor's true power unleashed, and he knew exactly how to do it. He watched the young demigod closely, seeing the conflict in his eyes, the storm of emotions he fought to suppress. There was doubt there, hesitation, and hesitation was a weakness. That would soon be removed. The trickster leaned forward, his voice smooth, deliberate, dripping with quiet power. "You are holding back," he said simply. Obanor, still catching his breath, barely turned his head. "I am not." A low chuckle escaped the trickster's lips. "Yes, you are. You fight like someone who is afraid of himself. That is why you cannot awaken. That is why you cannot become what you are meant to be." Obanor's fists clenched, his patience fraying. "And what am I meant to be?" The trickster rose, stepping forward, his presence growing heavier with each slow, measured step. The shadows around them seemed to lengthen, curling at his feet, drawn to his voice. "You," the trickster said, stopping just inches from Obanor, "are the heir to a legacy that was never meant to exist, a power that the elder gods fear." Obanor met his gaze, and for a moment there was doubt. The trickster smiled. That was all the confirmation he needed. "You hesitate because you do not yet understand the truth of what you are," he continued, his voice a whispered storm. "You think power comes from restraint, that control makes you strong. But true power is not in holding back, it is in knowing when to let go." Obanor's jaw tightened. "I will not become a monster." The trickster let out a quiet laugh, circling him now, speaking in a low, hypnotic tone. "And who told you that unleashing your true strength makes you a monster? Was it them?" He gestured vaguely at the warriors who had been training him. "Was it your past, your fear, your weakness?" Obanor said nothing. The trickster's voice softened, but his words became daggers. "You are not weak, Obanor, but you will never be strong enough until you embrace what you are, until you take what is already inside you and make it yours. Unshackle yourself." The shadows thickened. The air felt heavier. "Tell me, Obanor," the trickster said, his smile growing sharper. "How far are you willing to go?" Obanor exhaled slowly, his pulse hammering in his ears. He did not answer. The trickster's eyes glowed faintly. "We shall see." And with that, he turned away, his next plan already in motion. The last fragment of the orb of anti-creation needed to be found. With two in his possession, he could forge an army unlike any before. He could rip open the gates of Ayla's realm. He could unleash war upon creation. And when Obanor finally awakens, when he becomes what he was meant to be, he will finally have the last piece of the puzzle to fully start the war against the gods. Back in Ayla's realm, the tension was rising. Orunmila, Shango, and Amadioha had returned, their minds still burdened by what had transpired. They had seen enough, heard enough, to know that the time for preparation was over. War was coming. The chamber of Ayla's sanctuary was alive with movement. Gods, spirits, and celestial warriors gathered, each preparing for what lay ahead. The air hummed with energy, vibrating with the weight of power being called forth from across the realms. Ibiru stood at the center of it all, his hands working meticulously over the orb fragment, his tools glowing as he carefully continued the delicate process of separating the beast from the divine corruption. "This is more difficult than I anticipated," Ibiru muttered, his expression strained. "But I am close." Ala watched him carefully, her presence both calming and unyielding. "Make haste, Ibiru. We do not have much time." Ogun and Ikenga stood nearby, discussing plans for weaponry and reinforcements. "We will return to my forge," Ogun said firmly, his eyes burning with determination. "If war is coming, then we must prepare the weapons needed to fight it, and I will craft them myself." Ikenga nodded. "I will go with you. There is much to be done." Orunmila, standing at the edge of the chamber, turned to Amadioha and Shango. His voice was measured, but the weight of destiny hung on every word. "I must return to the Council of Alkebulan," he said. "It is time for them to know what is happening. And you too," he turned his piercing gaze to Amadioha and Shango, "must summon our allies. It is time to prepare for war." Shango grinned, excitement in his eyes. Finally, a fight worth having. Amadioha, however, was silent for a long moment before nodding. There was no turning back now. Ala exhaled, her divine presence spreading like a tide. She had already begun summoning her agents, the celestial beings who would stand by her side when the time came. The battlefield was being drawn, and all across the cosmos, the forces of creation and destruction were moving into place. The final war was coming. The trickster was making his move. The war had not yet begun, but the first battle was only moments away, and the gods were ready.